Imagine you've grown up dreaming of ballrooms, handsome suitors, and a love story straight out of a novel. You finally get your first season in London. You wear the white dress, you go to the parties. But here's the reality no one tells you. This isn't really about love. It's a business transaction. In the Regency era, marriage was the ultimate deal. It was about merging money, boosting your family's status, or securing a political alliance. Love was considered a nice bonus, but it was absolutely not the point. Your family didn't just hope you married well, they planned it. Fathers negotiated settlements. Mothers strategized about which lord had the biggest estate. You were raised to be pleasant, accomplished, and agreeable, not for your own happiness, but to attract the highest bidder. And the pressure was immense. If you didn't get a proposal, you were a burden. If you refused too many offers, you were difficult. Every dance, every conversation, every glance had a hidden price tag. You weren't just looking for a husband, you were trying to secure your entire future. And once you said, "I do," your whole world changed, and not always for the better.
Here's the part they leave out of the romance novels. The second a woman got married, she stopped being her own person in the eyes of the law. It's called coverture, and it's probably the darkest legal reality of Regency marriage. Basically, everything she owned instantly became her husband's property. We're not just talking about big things like land or houses. Her money, her inheritance, any jewelry she brought with her, even the dresses in her wardrobe. Legally, it all belonged to him now. Think about how terrifying that actually is. Imagine growing up in a wealthy family, maybe even bringing a significant dowry into the marriage. You'd assume that money offers some security. But nope, your husband could spend it all on gambling, or on his mistress, or on absolutely anything he wanted, and you had zero legal right to stop him. You couldn't open a bank account in your own name. You couldn't sign a contract. You couldn't even write a will without his permission. You were completely financially dependent on him for everything. And here's where it gets even scarier. If your husband died, the law actually protected his family, not you. His property would typically go to his oldest son or to his blood relatives. A widow might receive a small allowance called a jointure if it was arranged before marriage, but she had no automatic right to stay in her own home or keep her lifestyle. Suddenly, the woman who once ran a huge household could find herself with nothing. Now, what if the marriage was miserable? What if he was cruel or unfaithful or just made your life a daily nightmare? Well, you were pretty much trapped. Divorce was technically possible, but it was a fantasy for ordinary people. To get a full divorce, you needed a private act of parliament, which cost thousands of pounds, more than most families earned in a lifetime. Only the richest men in the country could pull that off, and even then, they usually had to prove their wife had committed adultery. For women, seeking a divorce was almost impossible, and society would destroy her reputation just for trying. You could get a legal separation, but that came with its own nightmare. If you left your husband, you left everything. You couldn't take your children, they were legally his property too. You'd have no money, no home, and no respectable way to support yourself. Your family might even turn you away to avoid scandal. So most women simply endured. They smiled in public, hosted dinner parties, and pretended everything was fine, while privately having no power, no voice, and no way out.
And this is why so many Regency marriages hid dark secrets behind closed doors. Because once you said those vows, you were trapped in a life you never truly chose. So what did that actually look like day to day? Imagine being married to someone who controls everything. Where you live, which friends you're allowed to see, which family members you can visit, how much money you get for household expenses. Some husbands wouldn't even give their wives enough pin money to buy a new bonnet or pay a servant. You'd have to beg for every penny, and if he said no, that was it. No arguing, no negotiating, just silence. And if your husband decided he was bored with you, too bad. He could spend all his time at his club, or with his friends, or at his mistress's house, and you just had to accept it. Emotional neglect wasn't considered a problem. It was just marriage. A husband could ignore his wife for years, have affairs openly, even bring his mistress to social events, and society would shrug. But if his wife so much as glanced at another man,
She'd be destroyed, completely ruined, cast out with nothing. Now here's the really dark part. Physical and emotional abuse definitely happened, but there was nowhere to report it. No police to call, no shelters to run to. If a husband was violent, neighbors might hear screams through the walls, but they'd probably look the other way. It was a private matter. A husband had the right to discipline his wife. That was the law. So women endured bruises, humiliation, and terror behind closed doors, wearing long sleeves to cover the marks, forcing smiles at breakfast, pretending everything was fine. And if a woman tried to speak up, if she confided in a friend or asked her family for help, the response was often, "You made your bed, now lie in it." Her own parents might tell her to go back and be a better wife. Her brother might refuse to get involved because it wasn't his business. She'd be labeled difficult, hysterical, or worse, a troublemaker. And if she pushed too hard, she risked never seeing her children again. Because remember, children belonged to the father. He could send them away to boarding school, forbid contact, or raise them to believe their mother was the problem. She had no legal right to fight for them. So most women learned to stay quiet, to swallow their pain, to perform happiness in public while dying inside in private. Because society didn't want to hear about unhappy wives. It wanted elegant hostesses, devoted mothers, and cheerful companions who never complained. A woman's job was to make her husband's life comfortable, regardless of what it cost her.
And this pressure to be perfect, to stay silent, to accept suffering as duty. Society had very clear rules. A wife was supposed to be graceful, obedient, and pleasant at all times. It didn't matter if your husband ignored you for weeks. It didn't matter if he embarrassed you publicly. It didn't even matter if you were genuinely suffering. Your job was to smile, pour tea, and make sure the household ran smoothly. Any hint of unhappiness or conflict reflected badly on you, not him. If rumors started circling about your marriage, people would whisper that you failed as a wife, that you were difficult, that you must have done something to drive him away. Reputation was everything. A woman's entire social life depended on being seen as respectable. If gossip spread that she was unhappy or desperate, or God forbid seeking attention elsewhere, invitations would stop. Friends would distance themselves. She'd find herself alone at social events, whispered about behind fans, slowly pushed to the edges of society. And in a world where your only purpose was to marry well and maintain that position, being cast out socially was a kind of death. You'd have no friends, no support, no future, just four walls and your own silence. And here's the cruel irony. We love watching shows like Bridgerton today. The pretty dresses, the glamorous balls, the stolen glances, the love stories. And yes, some of that existed. People did fall in love. Some marriages were genuinely happy. But for every romantic story, there were dozens of women living quietly desperate lives. Women who married men they barely knew. Women who handed over their money, their freedom, their very identities, and got nothing in return but a ring and a new last name. Women who smiled for portraits while counting the days until they felt safe again. The fantasy of Regency romance is beautiful. We can enjoy it. We can swoon over Mr. Darcy and dream of ballroom dances. But it's also worth remembering what was really happening beneath those empire waist gowns. Marriage wasn't just a romantic milestone. It was a legal trap, a financial arrangement, a social cage. And for too many women, it was a life sentence with no possibility of parole. So next time you watch a period drama and see a couple ride off into the sunset together, just ask yourself, what happened after the wedding? What happened when the music stopped and the guests went home, and she was left alone with a man she might not even like? That's the question history doesn't always answer, but it's the one worth asking.
Thank you so much for watching. Please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more historical and mythical videos.